I was born on the 26th of April, 1923. 26th of April, of course, is the day after Anzac Day. My parents christened me Barbara Krithia Mort, and Krithia is apparently a place, I believe, in Turkey, and my father, during World War I, had something about his army life at Krithia. He was awarded a military cross, but he never told us what it was he did to make it an award to him for his bravery during World War I. I had grown up in Sydney, in Vaucluse. I was in walking distance of Kambala School. That was officially Rose Bay, and I was there from the day, my first day of school to after I had done the leaving certificate, which I believe was 11 years altogether at Kambala, and I look back on it with affection particularly for some of the teachers, and grateful for having been to Kambala while we were living in Vaucluse. It wasn't until after I was married, after the war, quite some years after the war, that my parents sold the house where we were brought up. I was one of 6 children, so of course it was quite a big house. But I was married and had become a Queensland grazier's wife as a result of that marriage, so that I didn't see very much of Sydney after the war. The war started during my very last school holidays. The next year I went to a secretarial college, and I had a job after I graduated, and one night every week I went to Fort Street Girls High near the Sydney Bridge to make camouflage nets. And one night a lady in Air Force uniform was ushered into the room where we were making the nets. She had just become the head of the new Women's Auxiliary Australian Air Force. She came to tell us about this WAAAF, as it was called, and she told us about 2 musterings. One was being a mess steward, otherwise working in the kitchen, or being a wireless telegraphist, known as a WT. And I felt it would be very interesting being a WT, but it was necessary to be efficient at sending and receiving Morse code. They didn't teach Morse code in the Air Force. You had to be proficient before you became an ACW. 5 nights a week I went to a Morse code class run by a gentleman called Mr. O'Brien. We gradually got more and more efficient in Morse code, and finally were well enough to be able to join the Air Force. I must say that for the 5 nights each week, I couldn't go home after work to have my dinner because I couldn't get back in time. And so I went to Thorne's Cafe in Martin Place every night, and the 3-course meal cost me 1 shilling and 6pence. That's 15 cents in today's language. At any rate, I managed to pass the medical test to get into the Air Force. I was amazed to find that I was colourblind, red-green colourblind. I couldn't do that part of the test. However, that didn't matter in the Air Force because we were dealing with Morse code only, not coloured messages, which I believe they did need in the Navy. Well, I was sent immediately to Melbourne, where we did our course. Most musterings only took a few weeks to get through what we called our rookies, but for being a WT, it was necessary to learn a great deal about the sending of messages, etc., and receiving them, of course. And finally, we got through what we called our rookies, and I was posted to headquarters in Melbourne. As a telegraphist, I was getting I would be conversing with other telegraphists on the ground, and that was all pleasant. However, when I'd not been there very long, Townsville was bombed, and the schools were all evacuated. That meant that there was suitable accommodation for WAAFs. So I was posted to Townsville. And for about 12 months, I was living in the convent at Townsville because the children who had been at school there had been posted elsewhere, away from the likelihood of another bombing. While there, for the first period, I was communicating with other ground stations and also sending out messages about weather, which of course was very important to the Air Force. And so it was a case of sending out the message to all stations from Townsville. CQ, V, VNTV, that's all stations from Townsville, and then the message would be sent on the Morse code machine. It's not really a machine, but that word will do. For about 12 months I stayed there, and then I was sent out to Garbutt, the airport, and after that I was communicating with aeroplanes. It was very important for an aircraft to let it be known what plane it was and what time it was landing. Its ETA, estimated time of arrival. And that went on for about, all told, I was in Townsville for close to 2 years. And of course the war had progressed a lot during that time. And then I was sent to Richmond, just out of Sydney, and it was pleasant enough being there, the same sort of life that I had already experienced in Townsville. And then I finished up at Bradfield Park, and that was while there, the war came to an end. I had spent all that time sending and receiving Morse code messages. I had spent that time making some wonderful friends. I can't speak highly enough of them all. And it was a wonderful part of my life. It was not much later that I was married, and that's why my name is now Barbara Thelander, no longer Barbara Mort. But I look back on the time when I was Barbara Mort with gratitude for the friendships that we had, and it's a delight to meet anybody who was in the Air Force during the war. We seem to have a lot in common. My husband was the son of a Brisbane doctor. He had apparently had a very bad head injury before the war. He joined the Army, AIF, but the accident caused trouble, and so he was put out of the Army. However, his older brother was a doctor, and he was on the hospital ship, the Centaur, which was sunk during the war, which of course was a very bad thing for them to do. It was obvious that it was a hospital ship, and my husband was dreadfully upset at losing his brother in that way. He was able to join the small ships run by the Americans, and so he joined up again in spite of having been put out of the AIF, And he came up to Townsville, and I happened to meet him at a particular function at the barracks, and we became good friends. He had a most excellent way of writing letters, so a very nice handwriting, and the result was that after the war we were married. We went to live in the Queensland bush. He was a grazier, and I brought up half a dozen children there, and I'm always pleased that we were too far away from a school to send the children to school when they were very young. So rather than send them to boarding school until they were 10 years old, I had the pleasure of teaching them all by correspondence school. And I'll always be glad I had that in my lifetime. They have all done very well academically, so now I think that they could be the teachers and I could be the student. It was west of WWII, right on the border, and I look back on it feeling grateful to the lovely neighbours we had. It was a lovely way to spend that part of our lives, and I'll always be grateful for the life that I had. It's just how life presents itself. All the children of the district seemed to go to school when they were 10. In fact, my eldest son, I kept him an extra year, and then it was lonely for him if we went to, well, a Sunday tennis club or whatever, because his friends had already gone to boarding school. So after that, the children were all sent to boarding school at the age of 10, and that was down at the Gold Coast. I think it was a good place for them to be, and I'm glad that they did well at school, so that they went to universities, etc., etc. When I first went to Melbourne, we were taught exactly what we were allowed to do and what we weren't allowed to do, etc., etc. And on this particular day, an officer was telling us about wearing our uniform and exactly what was correct. And under no circumstances were we to wear jewellery. No earrings or brooches, necklaces. The only thing was a wedding ring. You couldn't wear an engagement ring. And she said that nothing else other than a wedding ring could be worn. And that night, some of the girls put on a little concert, and one of the items, there were two girls. One took the part of the officer, and the other one was just a new Air Force girl. And as an officer, she said about jewellery, and definitely nothing else could be worn other than a wedding ring. And at that stage, one of the girls raced across the stage, stark naked, holding up her left hand. She was wearing a wedding ring, nothing else. I'm still laughing about that, and that was how many years ago now? Yes, I didn't mention that we were shift workers. That is 24 hours a day, 8-hour shifts, and it was just the norm. We'd be marched to the SIG's office and take over from the girls who had already spent 8 hours, and we'd take over the position, and we'd be there for 8 hours, and some other girls would be marched to the SIG's office, and they'd take over. And I think we spent a week at that particular shift, so that if we were on the day shift, that was for a week, and then the next week we'd be on the afternoon and evening shift, and then the next week we'd be on the midnight to breakfast shift. That's as I remember it, but it's not very clear, but it just seemed to be the norm, and we enjoyed it like everything else. My memories of Townsville are just happy memories, even in spite of the fact that we had to get into the trenches on a couple of occasions with enemy planes that apparently didn't quite get there, but the people in the shops were always pleasant. We managed to, from time to time, have a meal at a cafe in the town. It was very much a military city. We didn't see many civilians at all, and other service personnel were always pleased to talk to you, so that it was all quite pleasant. And living in the convent as we did, we were overlooking the harbour, and I just think of Townsville as being a pleasant place to be. It must have been very hot, but we were in summer uniform, and I don't remember dreading the heat. We were all suffering from it as much as each other, so it just meant that we kept on being good friends and enjoying one another's company in spite of the weather. Well, I married a grazier. We were 80 miles from Goondiwindi, which is quite a long way, but it meant that Anzac Day was an important day in Torwood, which was our nearest little town, and we always had that in the afternoon. In most places, Anzac Day is a morning thing, but we did not have a minister of religion living in Torwood. They, from time to time, visited. We had our priest who came once a month to give a service in Torwood, and so on Anzac Day we were able to get someone to come down from WWII to run the service for Anzac Day. And there were 3 very, very nice ex-Air Force girls who lived up in WWII, and they came down to Torwood for the evening service on Anzac Day, and likewise my husband and I went up to WWII for the morning service in WWII, and I feel that there was a good reason to have excellent memories of the friendships that were made during the war, and these friends of mine, although they're no longer here, I had enjoyed their company so much, and we seem to have so much in common because of having all been in the Air Force during the war. While we were out west of WWII, it was very much a case of just making the most of life out there. If we had a very good year with, the sheep all having lovely wool and everything going beautifully, it still didn't make any difference to our life. We knew that if we had a good year with lots of rain, that who knows, next year we might have a drought. So we just went on living, appreciating what was good, but not making a great big thing of it. And I don't think my husband was very... he just accepted the bad years as well as the good years, because we couldn't alter it. It was just the way it was. And of course we had to have 6 children educated, so that financially it was a pretty big thing, but that was all looked after by my husband. I didn't discuss it very much with him. We were just glad that they all did well at school and had very nice friends, and we met some excellent teachers. And so it was, not, just from day to day. But when we came to Toowoomba, we sold the property, and we were able to have overseas trips, and joined various organisations, and I have never for one moment felt we should have gone to some place other than Toowoomba. Toowoomba has everything you need medically, etc., etc., and yet it's still small enough to be a very friendly place, and I'm grateful to all the lovely friends and neighbours that we have in Toowoomba. Well, I find that the Air Force Association, they're all very friendly. I go to their meetings. At this stage of my life, I'm no longer allowed to drive, so to go to a meeting I have to have an Air Force friend to pick me up and take me to a meeting, and we have the meetings in the morning and then go to lunch together. And yes, it's been wonderful to be part of the Anzac Day service. In recent years, I have not been allowed to march. I am given a place in a jeep, and whether I'm in a jeep or whether I'm marching, Anzac Day is still very special. I think it will be extremely special in another 3.5 years, plus 1 day, because that will be my 100th birthday. I think the very important thing to me is WWII, University of the Third Age. There's a choice of so many things you can do, and I'm delighted to go to several classes. And my son from Canberra had just retired, and he came up here to Toowoomba and came to a couple of WWII classes with me, having asked the tutor if I may bring him. He went back to Canberra and joined WWII, and he's very involved with WWII because he enjoyed Toowoomba so much. It's wonderful. I can only speak highly of everybody I've met in WWII and of the tutors that do such a wonderful job. He was actually Hugh Harold Thelander. You've got the spelling of Thelander there. But he was known as Digger. And this was because he was born towards the end of World War I, 1918, and as a toddler he liked wearing, I think it was his father's hat. His father was a doctor, but I think he must have belonged to something to do with the AIF. And so they called him the Little Digger because he liked wearing this fur felt. And the name Digger stayed with him for the rest of his life. I suppose I would say friendship is so important. And when I say friendship, that means helping when things need, help is needed, appreciating kindness. Now, do you know, just the other day we had a blackout with the with the storm, that's the word I wanted. And everything just went black. You couldn't see anything. And I was about to have my shower before going to bed. Well, I couldn't have a shower in the black, so I just went to bed. And sometime I went to sleep, and sometime later the lights were on. They must have come on. And I could hear there was somebody in the house. And I thought I'd better investigate. It seemed to be a man and a woman, and I didn't think it was my daughter and son-in-law. And lo and behold, I got to this room, which was lit up again. It was black when I'd left it. I'd been watching TV, and when the blackout ended, the TV came on again. And so in my bedroom, I could hear a man and a woman talking. And I didn't realise it was the TV. I wondered who the man and woman were going to be. But at any rate, it was no problem, and I'm still here. You know, I think it's not such a good idea. I don't think that everything is perfect, but I do feel that it's changed a lot during my life, but that's inevitable, and the population is so much bigger that obviously certain things have to be different from what they were like way back. But I'm grateful for growing up here in Australia, and I think I've been a very lucky person to have the life I have had.